World's biggest democracy. We're talking about it with Pradeep Singh, former energy industry executive and supporter of Narendra Modi, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you for being with us. From
Pleasure.
Patna in Bihar state, where they have been voting this Thursday, Shivam Sankar Singh, the author of How to Win an Indian Election. Thank you for joining us. And
Thank you
they're
for having me.
and they're also voting in Uttar Pradesh. France 24 correspondent Mandakini Gahlot is in Noida. Uh, Mandakini, first off, we were looking at statistics in the newsroom. There are more first time voters in India for this election than there are citizens here in France. We're always daunted by this huge 6 week exercise.
Well, absolutely. And we met a lot of those first time voters earlier today and heard a common complaint from many of them, that is, the voters under the age of 25, speaking about the jobs crisis. India is in the grips of its worst ever jobs crisis in several decades. So that's driving a lot of first time voters to the polling booth. So, absolutely, a lot of first time voters this time round.
You're in Noida, which is a new city. You could say it's in the suburbs of the capital, Delhi. What's it been like?
So Noida is part of a larger district and it's a very interesting place. It's largely rural, but parts of it, like you said, the suburbs adjoining Delhi are super urban. So it's a cross section of voters. They voted for Prime Minister Modi's BJP in the last election, but not in the one before that. So it's a district that's been known to swing between several parties. Like I mentioned, we met a lot of young voters this morning and later in the afternoon. But we also visited the rural areas where we heard from farmers who too have been experiencing very grave economic difficulties in recent years. And discontent amongst these two groups seem to be very high today. That's the youth and the farmers. But we also heard from lots of supporters of Prime Minister Modi. His party has been very effective at ensuring that their supporters show up at the polling booths. And what's very interesting is that even though they're voting for their local representatives, a lot of BJP supporters this morning came in stating that they're there to vote for Prime Minister Modi. So it's almost as if it doesn't even matter who the local representative is. They're there to ensure that BJP wins enough seats to get Mr. Modi re-elected. Now, voting in this part of Uttar Pradesh was largely peaceful. And the only controversy we saw was when security personnel were served lunch in food packets that were emblazoned with the acronym of the Prime Minister, that is NAMO. And that led to some complaints from voters about campaign violations. There was a cross section of ages, lots of elderly folks, lots of young people. The voter turnout at around 5 o'clock was approximately 60%, so that's not great. But we'll have to wait for more accurate numbers. And of course, all these voters will have to wait till May 23rd for the results.
May 23rd. Let me ask you, Shivam, what's been the bread and butter issue where you are in Bihar state?
There are actually a lot of major issues on the ground. Bihar is one of those states, and Uttar Pradesh is one of them, where caste is a major factor in who people vote for. Because in general, the larger caste, caste groups have parties that have represented their specific interests, and those parties get a lot of cadre support from these caste groups. Other than that, nationalism and national pride has become a major issue after the surgical strikes on Pakistan. So a lot of people who are voting today recognize that Narendra Modi might have failed on jobs, might have failed to relieve farmer distress, but are still willing to give him a chance because he's acted against Pakistan, which is something that hasn't happened in previous elections. I have worked with several national parties and I've been working on elections in states for the past 4 years. I have actually never seen an election this negative because no one really has a campaign for the future of India. And the parties asking for votes today are asking on the basis of we are better than the alternative. That's what they offered to the voters today. That is why voter turnout has actually been lower than expected and lower than the 2014 elections, because a lot of voters just don't have hope for a better India. They just have hope for, like, okay, whoever comes back to power, at least it's going to be better than the other guy.
You're saying that, but we're seeing these figures from the outside world of how India's growth is outpacing that of even China these days. So why the pessimism?
So the thing is, if you look at data, then UPA 1 and UPA 2, if you look at it from 2004 to 2014, then India's growth rate was actually higher than it is right now. So the pessimism, one of the major causes is actually unemployment. And the Modi government, when it came to power in 2014, promised 2 crore jobs. And they haven't been able to deliver on that one specific promise. Other than that, there is a lot of farmer distress in rural India. And policies such as demonetization and GST have hit businesses a lot. And there has been a business slowdown. If you look at export growth, then across the UPA 1 and 2 regime, exports grew at over 17%. And right now, it's grown at 0.81% in the previous 5 years.
That's Pradeep Singh points that we've heard quite a bit in this campaign. That demonetization, when they decided to try to stamp out the informal sector skirting taxes, that it backfired to a degree, and also the questions over unemployment. Did Narendra Modi deliver on that campaign promise that yes, he's a Hindu nationalist, but he would put toilets before temples? It was his big slogan in 2014, development before ideology. Did he deliver?
Well, I mean, it's a question of whom do you ask in India, because as someone said, it's a very polarized status today. But at the same time, I'll take a point that Mandakini was mentioning from Noida, that one of the persons in Noida who went to vote today, when he reached the polling booth, he voted for someone he didn't even know the name of. But he voted for him because he was not BJP. And he compared the passion and the energy with which BJP people are bringing people to vote, the way they have made people aware of their candidate and what has been achieved. Whereas in many places, and this morning's case in Noida was an example, that people are voting for non-BJP candidates without even knowing who they are and what they represent. Okay, that's the ground reality. Now, coming back to the question of demonetization and the job, in my view, Modi has largely delivered. And I give you the reasons for it, how he has delivered against the promises that he made. And he made many promises. And there are some statistics that I can reel out straight away. The first thing is that his massive imagination for massive schemes and his audacity to launch these schemes and try to implement is really breathtaking.
So he's a guy who tries stuff in a nation where there's lots of red tape.
A nation with lots of red tape, and he is trying to be a disruptor. Now,
Right.
I give you some examples. One is the National Health Scheme that he has launched. The National Health Scheme, you would be surprised to know, and maybe you know it, is covering 500 million people of the lower income strata. And these people, for the first time in their lives, would be given an amount of 6,000 euros per year, which doesn't sound much.
But is
in Europe.
that message resonating? You heard Shivam say how people from lower castes are there's a backlash against the BJP among them.
Well, there is a backlash because let's not forget that the issues of caste are heavily entrenched in India. It's not easy to overcome all these prejudices, so if I may say so. This is one. On sanitation, we all know,
Right.
98 million toilets built. Now, which prime minister of the country will talk about building toilets to the nation? That's what he has done.
So many other points to touch on. Shivam, I want to bring up one point with you. It's something you've written about extensively. And you talked earlier about the sort of toxic atmosphere. Of course, fueling that to a degree is how the campaign was carried out, and the issue of micro-targeting, which goes on around the world these days, but also concerns over fake news that's spread over certain social media like WhatsApp. What have you found?
Yep. So one of the major parts is like you might have noticed right now, my friend who supports the BJP did not really address the question of jobs. It's something that the BJP also hasn't included in its manifesto this time, even though it was a major point when they came to power in 2014. To counter this, what the party has realized that it needs to appeal to emotions. It's not going to be an election that's fought on logic, especially because the regional parties have a caste-based vote bank, which is again an emotional thing. The emotional narrative that needs to be built will be built on nationalism. It's going to be built on religion and things like this. Because of that, fake news dominates today. And Facebook and WhatsApp have provided tools through which the Bharatiya Janata Party and pretty much any party could deliver message directly to the ground and directly to the voters. And these contents could not be checked for accuracy. They could not be checked for facts. So an ecosystem came up where people created graphics, where people brought in videos from Syria claiming that it's a video from Uttar Pradesh, and then circulated it on their networks to create a narrative of hate against different communities and appeal to voters based on that. So that is a major component. To their credit, Facebook has basically clamped down on a lot of Facebook pages that were circulating news. WhatsApp has also tried to limit the creation of new groups, but the problem with WhatsApp is that it's an encrypted medium. So no one really knows what kind of a message is going out on WhatsApp, and they haven't done anything about the groups that were created before the new policies kicked in. So BJP has a major competitive advantage on that because no new party can create as many groups, but the existing ones still exist and operate.
All right, just one final point. Mandakini Gahlot, how would you characterize the mood of this campaign compared to the one 5 years ago?
Well, I'd have to agree with Shivam in that we're seeing a lot more rhetoric. There's a lot of negativity around the way in which the campaign has been shaped. A lot of really surprising things. Just today, for instance, the BJP president, that's Mr. Amit Shah, said that if voted back to power, they will carry out something called the National Registry of Citizens, which is a very large exercise that aims to recognize exactly who is a citizen of India and weed out infiltrators. Now, he specified that they will weed out these infiltrators except for Buddhists, Hindus, and Sikhs, leaving out many of the other religious groups in India. So we're hearing a lot of messages like this from the top, from leaders like Mr. Amit Shah and other members of the BJP party. There certainly is a lot more rhetoric around religion, trying to pit communities against each other. This time around, the last time around, the Prime Minister focused on his image as a man of development. 5 years later, voters are asking why haven't they seen all of that development? And so there appears to be an effort to shift the narrative towards issues that are emotional, like religion and caste.
Leave it there. There's a lot more to say. Unfortunately, we're short on time, but I want to thank you so much, Mandakini Gahlot, our correspondent, joining us there, as well as Shivam Sankar Singh in Bihar State, and Pradeep Singh for being with us